You're watching Twin Tier Sunday with Jennifer Sheahen.
Welcome to Twin Tier Sunday. I'm your host, Jennifer Sheahen. How much do you actually understand about your area's history? I challenge you this half hour to not just watch the stories go by on your screen, but to truly understand where your roots of your community come from. Because one day, someone will be studying the history that you make.
Ready! Reset! Fire! Well done, boys. Prime the load! First rank to the front. Go, boys! Sweep up, Barry. Sweep up in front of the ring.
We are up at the Newtown Battlefield. This place has so many deep roots within our community, bringing back history from way, way back when. Paul, go ahead and tell me a little bit about what you guys are going to be doing this weekend and how important it is to keep that history alive here.
Okay, well, this weekend marks the 235th anniversary of the Battle of Newtown, which was the largest battle of the Sullivan campaign that came through here in August of 1779. Behind us is our native Indian village, which is a recreation of a similar village which was right at the bottom of the hill here. In 5 days, this will be a complete living and breathing little city this weekend.
That is incredible. Now, tell me a little bit about the battle and what it was like and how it got started, I guess, from start to bottom, because some people don't even know that this is up here in their own community.
Well, the Sullivan campaign started in June of 1779. General Washington ordered General Sullivan and General Clinton to amass an army and meet at the forks of the Susquehanna and the Chemung, where present-day Athens is, and together a campaign was launched against the Iroquois and British in central and western New York. It was the largest campaign of 1779 and encompassed a full 20 to 25% of the total American army at the time. It was a tremendous undertaking.
Now, how many people are involved with this reenactment this weekend?
Actual participants will be somewhere between 250 and 300. It will range from military participants, both American, British, and natives, civilian participation, plus 18th century sutleries and shopkeepers and such. It will be quite a mix. It will be a lot to see.
Now, was this battle a bloody one, or is it more so kind of taking over ground?
It was a little bit of both, and at the same time neither. The battle itself, by modern standards, was pretty small. It lasted just a couple hours. Casualties on the native and British side are very hard to estimate because there's no enlistment record, so you have no idea how many Indians there were here. Probably not a lot of casualties. American casualties were like 6 or 8. There was actually a battle 2 weeks earlier in the village where village of Chemung is today that actually had more casualties than this one did. But it was a large battle, approximately 1,000 native and British versus approximately 3,500 to 4,000 Americans.
That's absolutely incredible. When you guys come up here to the Newtown Battlefield, it is a state park now. You'll see a big monument. Obviously, that's not where we are right now. We are in an Indian village. Tell me about this and how it was built and the incredible history that this part of the park has that, I never knew even existed.
Well, the village, as we see it behind us, was built approximately 20 years ago. The Chemung Valley Living History Center, with help from the AmeriCorps program, built a recreation of a 1770s Iroquoian village, much like the village of Newtown would have appeared 235 years ago.
It's great. It's just great. Now, why do you participate in this every year? This is something I guess you do on your own time. Why do you take the time to come out here and kind of recreate all of this wonderful history we have?
Reenactors love to share what they know, so this is the best way to share it. It's a lot of fun, and it's a learning experience. Every time we do something like this, we learn a little more. Most of the reenactors you'll meet up here do a lot of research. They take a great pains to do things as properly as they possibly can. And it's a way of showing and sharing what they've learned.
Well, then share a little bit with me about what you have on you and why you chose to bring it in with you.
Well, essentially I am dressed as a Continental Army private. Actually pretty well dressed for this campaign. I would imagine I would have been much dirtier by the time I got to since I would be wearing the same uniform since April of the spring, and now it's August. It would have been pretty rough looking. I have a standard issued musket. The musket that I'm carrying is a British Longland pattern musket. It would have been considered obsolete by the time of the Revolution, but the American Army took and used whatever they could find. I have a bayonet and a tomahawk.
Go ahead and turn this way so
Okay.
everybody can see.
Bayonet and a tomahawk. The tomahawk was something that was issued instead of a sword. In the wilds of North America, swords just got in the way, and tomahawks were pretty easy to produce and very easy to learn how to use. They also were a good tool for clearing brush, building fires, and so forth. And then we have a cartridge box, and the cartridge box essentially was a place to hold their ammunition. The ammunition was loaded in paper cartridges, of which there was powder and a ball, and they would bite the cartridge off and prime and load the musket and fire it. A well-trained soldier could load about 3 to 4 times a minute, so it's not very fast. And most of the time they were only issued about 60 rounds per soldier, so it's not like today's modern armies.
And of course, Paul had to teach me how to use that big old musket.
So on command, they would handle their arms, and they would prime and load. Prime, they'd open the frizzen, they'd bite the cartridge, they'd pour powder into the pan, they would cast it about, put the rest of the powder into the barrel along with the ball. At that time, that's the ball. They would then ram the ball home until it was on the bottom. They would replace the rammer. They would bring it back to this position here, and on command they would make ready, which was to cock it. They would take aim, which was to aim it, and then they would fire it.
That's great. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. It's quite a process though. It's pretty long. Jeez.
It is.
That must be why they only gave you 60 bullets. And when I finally got my own hands on the musket, let's just say I was very nervous, but had a lot of fun.
Now it's time to shoot and fire. What would you tell somebody that may have never been to a reenactment before? Would you recommend to come out and tell them why they should come and see everything that is to offer here?
Well, they should definitely come out and see. We don't touch a lot on history anymore in the schools. It's something that most people will never see unless they actually go and attend one and look and listen. One of the things that sets our event a little bit aside from others is that the original battle took place in the woods. Our skirmishes and stuff will take place in the woods as well.
We're gonna fire, and you're gonna go, when you fire, about 20 yards. Stop again, time and load, independent fire, keep them moving.
You're actually part of it, and it's a very neat experience.
After the break, we explore Elmira. Learning about the Elmira prison camp that was once here many, many years ago. Why don't you go ahead and tell me about the exhibit that is currently here?
Sure, this is the exhibit on the Elmira Civil War prison camp, which was here 150 years ago. Elmira had started out at the beginning of the Civil War as a rendezvous point, so all the soldiers or soon-to-be soldiers who enlisted would come to Elmira to get trained and then sent off to the battlefields. At the end of the war, as the military was looking around, they had many, many prisoners, and they were looking around what to do with them. Elmira became a natural point in that it was well developed for training, and now they took what used to be the training grounds and converted them to the prison camp and shipped the soldiers up here. And Elmira was well connected to the rest of the country by railroad. And that's why it was initially chosen as a training facility and then became a natural point for to send soldiers, prisoners from other places up to Elmira to be housed in Elmira.
That's absolutely incredible. How many prisoners were here at one point? Like, was the maximum amount of prisoners that were here?
All told, almost 12,000 prisoners came through the camp. At any one time, about 5,000 was the most when the prison population peaked.
And how were their conditions? I know it was often referred to as Elmira. What were the conditions like for a prisoner that would have been, living during that period?
Well, it was a difficult place to be, and a lot of the 12,000 prisoners that came through, almost 3,000 prisoners did die and are now buried over in Woodlawn Cemetery. But it also depended on who you were. If you were a prisoner with some skills, you might end up as an officer's aide, and you had a much easier time than if you didn't have any kind of skills and were just in the general population and had to kind of scrap to get by a little bit. The food rations were always a bit stingy, and certainly the sanitary conditions were not the best. But it was also, you have to remember, it was a challenge, in the Civil War. Far more soldiers on both sides died of disease than they died of battle wounds. So certainly being in prison was no easy part of service, but dying of disease was also part of one of the things that all soldiers had to face.
Definitely. And how long is this exhibit here, and what are some of the highlights that people can come down and see?
Well, the exhibit is up until July of next year, and it mirrors the length of time this prison camp was actually open, for about 13 months, from July of 1864 to July of 1865. Everybody's heard of the Elmira prison camp. They know about it, but there's nothing left of it. And so we have just a few small pieces here and there. Some of the prisoners made some items that they would sell to help support themselves. Right at the end of the war, the military said sell. And there's probably an awful lot of houses, from the 1870s in Elmira that have wood that was once part of the prison camp, because the government just sold everything right away.
Now, just so we're clear, where was the prison camp in Elmira? Because some people don't even know. Maybe they're living or living close to where, thousands of men were housed, thousands of men died, and it's right there in your own backyard.
Yeah, the Hoffman and Water Streets are the one corner, and if you then water over to the Chemung River, Water Street over to the Chemung River. So it was a large area, but it sat down against the river, and like I said, immediately at the end of the Civil War, the government sold everything off, and the area is now private housing.
There you go. You can be living on some history right there. Now, to my understanding as well, the pond that is down there is also created a lot of issues for these prisoners, and that was maybe where some of the disease came from as well.
Right. Foster's Pond initially served as the water source for the camp, but as more and more men came into the camp, it ended up as a latrine, and of course it wasn't exactly very sanitary. There was a lot of challenge with sanitary conditions and sort of what do you do when you got 5,000 men inside a very restricted area, and how do you keep it clean, how do you keep it healthy? And given the fact that 3,000 men ended up dying, obviously they didn't do the best job.
Definitely. Now, you were telling me too when I was walking in, there's a whole portion of the exhibit about how it changed Elmira history. How is that after the prison war camp closed? What was kind of the progression, and how does it still ingrained in our community today?
Well, starting with the Civil War and starting with especially the military contracts, a lot of money poured into Elmira. And then when all the soldiers came into Elmira, they you bring in many thousands of people, that brings in that much more money. The establishment of the railroads in Elmira all helped to lead to Elmira becoming an industrial center. And in the period after the Civil War, we were booming in heavy manufacturing and heavy industry, and the railroads let us ship those products all over the world. So that is really one of the most important legacies of the Civil War. Some of that is now gone, but it's still, we still have manufacturers here who maybe didn't start until, 1880, 1890, but they're still part of that heritage of, that comes out of the Civil War.
That's wonderful. So even after generations and generations, there's still people wanting to come back here to our very own city to learn about their history and their roots that, were lost maybe years ago. So how long, one more time, can people come out here? And then how much does it cost as well?
Sure. It's $3 to get into the museum. The exhibit is open until July of 2015. We have plenty of other exhibits as well, so we invite everybody to come down. The museum is open Monday through Saturday from 10 to 5.
Wonderful. All right, thank you so much. Stay tuned. After the break, we're going to learn a little bit more about our own history.
Twin Tier Sunday will return in a moment.
We are now about to hop on the Mark Twain tour bus. Now go ahead and tell me a little bit about the tour and what people can expect when they hop on the bus.
It's a 1-hour tour through the city of Elmira, of course known as Mark Twain country because Mark Twain spent so much time here. But we don't like to have Twain overshadow the other cultural and historic points of interest here. We do point out a lot of beautiful historic architecture. We talk about the Civil War influence here, the Underground Railroad. Elmira was a huge stop on the Underground Railroad. Our sports history, and of course Mark Twain is the centerpiece of the entire tour.
Now, what is kind of the staple of the tour? When people get off, they remember this part the most.
It's funny because local people who have lived here all their life, when they get off say, boy, I didn't know this, boy, I didn't know that. And a lot of it has to do with the architecture and with the Civil War history and the Underground Railroad. Everybody knows that Mark Twain spent summers here and did a lot of his writing here, but a lot of people, local people especially, don't know much about the history of Elmira, which is unfortunate.
Definitely. So we're going to show you a little bit more about the tour in just a few minutes here. How long have you been taking the tour?
I've been doing the tour. This is my 13th season. And it's just for 2 months, July and August. It's kind of my fun job in the summer. I'm retired. And before me, I believe the tour ran for about 15 years before I did it. So it's been about 25 or 30 years in the community.
Wow. How long? Oh, why did you take this on then?
I love history, local history especially. I'm not a professional historian by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just fascinated with any aspect of local history.
Wonderful. All right. And then when can people come take this tour?
It runs Tuesdays through Saturdays, July and August. We are getting down to the end of the season now. We've got less than 2 weeks. The final day is Saturday, the 30th of August. 10 a.m. through 2 p.m., 5 trips a day, Tuesday through Saturday. The 2 o'clock trip is a little bit different than the other trips, more Mark Twain oriented. It goes into Woodlawn Cemetery and actually visits Mark Twain's grave. Tends to be the more popular one, not always, but it's normally more booked than the earlier tours, but they're all great, believe me. And you can get reservation. We recommend reservations here at the Chemung Valley History Museum. They're not necessary, but we hate to have you show up and not have room for you, so it's best to call ahead to make sure that you can get on board.
Wonderful. Okay, and then how much does it cost?
It's $4 for adults, $2 for children under 12.
All right.
Bargain at twice the price.
Great. Let's take the tour. Here we go.
Mark Twain Country and Old 73. Old 73 is a replica of an 1890s trolley, similar to what might have ridden the rails here a little over a century ago. Well, we do refer to our community as Mark Twain Country because Samuel Langhorne Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, spent over 20 summers here. And right here is where he wrote his greatest classics, including The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. But we don't like to have Twain completely overshadow the other cultural and historic points of interest in the community, many which I'll be pointing out over the next hour.
Believe it or not, many of Elmira's churches carry the stories of some of the great history of the city, like Trinity Episcopal Church with its golden spire. And just down the street, another church has architecture inspired from all over the world.
And coming up through the next intersection, also on the left, looming up above the trees of the park, you'll soon see the silver dome of the Park Congregational Church. Well, there off in the park next to the church stands a statue of a tall, kind of a green-looking fellow. That man's name was Reverend Thomas Beecher, and he was minister of the park church for over 40 years. Reverend Beecher was a very outspoken abolitionist, and he had an equally prominent and outspoken sister by the name of Harriet Beecher Stowe. If that name sounds familiar, she's the lady who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. Well, Beecher designed the park church himself and wanted it to reflect his concept of a congregational church, one welcoming all members of the Christian faith. So the park church has taken on a very eclectic architectural style. The silver dome represents St. Peter's Basilica and the Roman Catholic faith. The Gothic tower behind that represents Canterbury Cathedral and the Anglican Church.
And just across the street was once home to millionaire Jervis Langdon and his mansion.
Jervis Langdon especially believed that women had the right to an education equal to that of men. The women of the mid-1800s were not even allowed to attend college or university. So Jervis put his money where his mouth was. He and a number of his wealthy contemporaries pooled their money together to form a college that would not only admit women, it would be exclusively for women. Very radical idea back then. Nonetheless, in 1855, Elmira Female College opened its doors. Not only was it the first college in the nation exclusively for women, it was the first in the nation to grant women a degree equal to that of men. But of all of Jervis Langdon's many generous contributions to our community, perhaps his greatest contribution was that of his daughter Olivia, or Livy as she was known. Livy Langdon was a true jewel of a Victorian lady, socially refined and highly educated, and like they say, opposites attract. Livy managed to catch the eye of an obscure young newspaper man from out west by the name of Sam. While Livy had attended the finest finishing schools, including Elmira Female College, young Sam, on the other hand, never made it much past the 6th grade. He had a coarse personality and a spicy vocabulary. But love is blind, and in 1870, Sam and Livy were married in the Langdon Mansion by Reverend Thomas Beecher. The young Sam Clemens, of course, would go on to outshine even his wealthy father-in-law, as he would become known throughout the world as Mark Twain.
And on Elmira's campus lies a true gem of the East Coast, Mark Twain Study.
Also on the right, nestled among the trees of the campus, this small brown wooden octagonal-shaped building is the study where Mark Twain wrote his greatest classics.
The study was built by Mark Twain's sister-in-law, so him and his wife would return every summer to stay with her.
So she had this little study designed in the shape of a riverboat pilot house, then secretly built high atop a knoll overlooking her farmhouse in the valley and surprised Sam with it as a gift. There he had all the privacy he needed to do his writing. Even his 3 daughters had to have an appointment to visit him when he was working in the study. Some folks say Susan Crane had it built so her brother-in-law would have somewhere to smoke his cigars besides in her farmhouse. Twain was known to smoke nearly 40 cigars a day. Well, in a minute, we'll let you step inside the study. It doesn't smell like cigar smoke anymore. Inside, you'll see many small furnishings and photos of the study itself, or of Quarry Farm, which was the name of Susan Crane's home, which was also donated to Elmira College, but is not open to the public. There's a Mark Twain ambassador inside. She'll give you some information on the study itself, and I'll be outside with a few points of interest on the college campus. Watch your step, folks, but please move quickly into the study.
Right next to the study is a white stone monument telling the story of the last known descendant of Mark Twain.
I'd like to draw your attention now to the large stone block here. You can faintly read the engraving on it. It says Clara L. Clemens, 1874. Clara was one of Mark Twain's 4 children, the only one of his entire family who would outlive Twain. He really lived a very tragic life. Clara married and had a daughter, Nina, who never married and never had children. So his family bloodline ended in 1966 when his only granddaughter, Nina, died of a drug overdose.
And for all you romantics out there, Mark and his wife were true soulmates, and a part of the campus tells the story.
If you look across in the distance, if you step this way a little bit and look in the distance, you'll see a statue on a white pedestal. That is Olivia Langdon Clemens, Mark Twain's wife. She was a member of the class of 1864 of Elmira Female College. She would have gone to school right there in Coles Hall. That was the only building here at that time. She's looking off to her left, which would be our right. Behind the trees is a statue of her husband, Mark Twain. The pose for that statue was taken from the pose that you saw in the study of him standing at the top of the steps.
There is so much more to learn on the tour, but I'll let you explore and learn that on your own. It's definitely worth the trolley ride.
Well, folks, that just about concludes our trolley tour through Mark Twain country. I hope you've enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your day here in the beautiful Chemung Valley. Please exit through the front doors.
All right, thank you so much for joining me on this wonderful show of the history of Elmira. I hope you learned a little bit because I know I definitely did. And thank you so much for taking me on the tour. It was a wonderful experience, and we'll see you next
Pleasure.
week.
Thank you for joining us.